Welcome to an experiment. So I'm Father Thomas Frisbee, and this is Collette Mary, baptismal name. And we are going to have a little conversation regarding your journey to Orthodoxy. This is the first in a series that we'll probably be doing from the church here. Nothing is scripted, right?
Nope, nothing's scripted.
I just told Collette to let me talk to her. So hopefully, if anything word is said by yours truly, I'll be able to figure out how to edit it and stuff. So, but having said that, we're just going to kind of jump into a conversation. Collette, you're a convert to Orthodoxy. And so first thing I'd like to just ask you is, what was your upbringing? And then from there, what led you to Orthodoxy?
Okay. Well, I was raised in Colorado, Western Slope, kind of a rural town area, by my mom, my dad, and I have a younger brother,
Okay.
Eric. And basically growing up, I went to public school. My parents both worked full time. My mom and all of my extended family on my mom's side are quite religious. They are independent fundamental Baptists.
Not just Baptists.
Not just Baptists.
Not just independent.
No. Yeah. Independent fundamental Baptist.
Okay.
And they have the word independent and fundamental in there for very specific reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then my dad is not really anything, I guess. I mean, I guess I could say functionally agnostic or
Okay.
maybe atheistic, I guess, but he would say he believes in God. So I was kind of raised with both sides of the spectrum growing up and saw some extremes on both sides, really. So on my mom's side of the family, growing up until the time I was in 8th grade, we didn't really go to church, just occasionally, but I was really influenced by my extended family.
Just move this over a little bit closer. Okay.
I was really influenced by my extended family, so especially my grandmother. So basically, to give just a short explanation of what independent fundamental Baptist is.
Well, we have plenty of time here.
Yeah,
So.
it's pretty much Baptist, right?
Yeah.
So like you have the typical Baptist things, like they believe in substitutionary atonement, faith alone in Christ alone for salvation, which usually involved, there being like some sort of altar call, not always, but it was just like an altar call where the pastor would, after a sermon where he's trying to explain what salvation is and how you can accept Christ into your heart to save you and change your life, you would then make a decision to follow Christ. And they believe in, once saved, always saved. So once you make that decision and you say the prayer to Christ, asking him to save you and come into your heart, you're saved. You're going to go to heaven.
Right.
Basically it's done. I mean, basically, I mean, they have, the idea of sanctification, which is continuing to grow in your faith.
Right.
But basically, you are going to heaven. But then they have add-ons to that basic Baptist belief. So the main add-ons they have, independent. So they're each local church is
So they're not Southern Baptist by way of a
they're
convention.
not under any kind of convention or denomination.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't even consider themselves Protestant. So they wouldn't even say that they come out of like the Reformation,
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they have this belief in like Baptist secessionism, which is basically this idea that Baptists always, they can trace the Baptist history, starting with John the Baptist and the Acts of the Apostles till today. And they point to different people groups who supposedly were Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
There was a book that I was kind of, I wouldn't say raised with, but that was talked a lot about. And I had a copy of it for a long time. It was this little pamphlet called The Trail of Blood.
I know The Trail of Blood.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it even like takes the Baptist roots back to like the Cathari and the Waldensians and the Montanists and the Donatists, all these Gnostic groups,
Right.
Very interesting. But another add-on is soul winning. So that's like evangelism, but sort of like the Latter-day Saints, we would go to people's homes, knock on their door, and basically the first question we would ask them is, if you were to die today, do you know for certain that you would go to heaven? You know? And the word certain
Sure.
is very important, like the idea of being certain that you're going to go to heaven, which is a whole other bag of worms in itself. But another tenet is biblical inerrancy, but specifically the King James version. We read the King James 1611 version, and basically they believe that the Textus Receptus, which is what that comes from, is inerrant or inspired, and all of the other biblical.
So God on Mount Sinai said, here's 10 commandments and here's a book you might want to read later.
Yeah. So everything else is corrupted.
Yeah.
The Roman Catholic Church corrupted things, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of negative thoughts and feelings about the Roman Catholic Church as well. So, and then what else? What else is an add-on? Oh, there's a lot of external rules, so they believe that the fundamentalist parts, the fundamentals of the faith, but that includes things that I now would not consider fundamental, right? Like, women have to dress a specific way, very conservative dressing, that we couldn't drink alcohol, even like wine, dancing, going to movies. It's very separationist, like separatist, I guess. Not so much like the Amish, right? But like very much, we're the true Baptists, we're the true Christians, and everyone else is the world. It's worldly, and so they kind of keep to themselves in a way. I mean, they even have their own colleges and stuff. So
even though they're going out and knocking on people's doors, it's kind of like, come into our group and then you're going to shelter from the world because we're separated from the world.
Yeah. And there's definitely like a superiority complex there. And, that was one thing that I experienced very vividly and firsthand. Like I have I wouldn't say religious trauma necessarily. I wouldn't use that strong of a word necessarily, but, there was some things that were like very harmful and hurtful to me as a young person coming up. When I was in 8th grade was when I got saved.
Right.
So at a summer camp, I made the decision during an altar call to accept Christ. And I mean, to this day, I would still say that was the day
Which
that
is good.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, it's good. There's nothing really wrong with it long because you can make a real decision to follow Christ, which I did, as long as it's not wrapped up in all the emotions, which a lot of people do.
Yeah, and the false assurance that because you had this emotional, spiritual moment, therefore you've got your passport into heaven signed.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I made that decision, and it was a real decision in 8th grade. And at that point, my mom, who had been raised independent fundamental Baptist, was like, I got to get these kids in church. It's serious. I got to get them in church. And, I think she always wanted us in church, but because of my dad as well, there was, she just was conflicted. She didn't want to like pull our family apart and things like that. So we started going to church pretty much every time the doors were open, essentially. I took it very seriously. I was a very serious IFB.
Independent fundamentalist Baptist. Yeah.
I got rid of all my pants and only wore dresses. I was only listening to, even though they want you to listen to only hymnals, like they don't even like the contemporary Christian. But I got rid of all of my other CDs, and was listening to like contemporary Christian and music. I was at church. I was trying to like evangelize my friends, things like that, and so I took it very seriously. I'd say for like the first year, I was doing that, like the external stuff as well. And then I started, like for me, a weird contradiction or conundrum was living that way, also going to public school, and also being in my home where there were contradictions itself. And so I always kind of felt like I was very serious about it, but I didn't. It was like I guess the best way to say it is like I was a black sheep at church, and I was a black sheep at school. I was a black sheep in both places, you know, and that was hard for me. Like I felt like growing up in the IFB world during, which was mostly my high school years, it was like there was no room for the sinner. But what a sinner was, at least from my perception, what I saw was someone who followed the rules as they told them. You know, those external rules, wearing certain things, not hanging out with certain people, like things like that, you know. So I mean, you know, it's hard.
Yeah.
And then there's one story actually, like from my IFB years, that still to this day, like it, I don't know, it like does something to me still. So they used to take us to a youth camp. We went like 2 or 3 years. I think it was like during the summer. We would go to Colorado Springs, a bigger IFB church. And I mean, we would do some fun things like go bowling and volleyball and stuff like that. But it was mostly in church, listening to hard preaching. Like people, multiple churches would come and there'd be multiple preachers and they'd be up there really hard preaching. I mean, things like, you know, hellfire, brimstone, sort of get saved or else, you know, kind of stuff. So one thing that like I'll never forget is they had a preacher up there talking to a room full of teenagers, you know, and prepubescent kids going through all sorts of hormonal changes and things like that. And I really struggled with acne on my face when I was young. It was always a problem for me. And a preacher was up there and he was saying, if you have acne, it's because you've been listening to so much secular music that it's oozing out of your face.
Oh my gosh.
And me being the girl in our youth group who struggled with it, all of the heads of my turned and looked right at me. And this, I mean, that's like an extreme story, but that was kind of the feel.
Wow.
Always the feel. And that's what I mean by like I was a black sheep there. Because it was like I could never be good enough. And since my dad didn't go to church, there was sort of the stigma there. There was just a lot of, you know, it was difficult. Because like I had a lot of family members who were very involved. Like both parents were IFB, the family's IFB, they all homeschool, they all dress this way, and they don't listen to this music, and they don't watch movies, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, I don't really fit in anywhere. I don't fit in here at church. I don't fit in here at school. Where do I fit in, you know? And I don't know how long it was, maybe 6 months to a year before. So there was a big event that occurred at the church. And like 6 months to a year before it happened, I was like wanting to go to a different church because I knew of I had a crush on a boy who was a Christian, but he went to like some other
liberal place,
some other church, you know, I don't know. And I'm like, Mom, can we go check out different churches, you know? And there were, you know, I just was sort of questioning things, I guess. And I wasn't only wearing dresses anymore. I had decided like, you know, this is something the church wants me to do, like the people there, but not necessarily God. Like I didn't feel, you know, sure, modesty is one thing, but the strict thing is another, you know? And then we ended up getting kicked out of the church.
Wow.
My whole family. Like not just us, but like my whole extended family.
Why?
Well, it's an independent church run by a local pastor who had some ideas of how the church should start being run. Some people, my family members and like my cousin who was the youth pastor at the time, disagreed with these very strict rules. And he, even though it was supposed to come to a vote, the pastor unfortunately manipulated things and jumped up on the pews and was yelling that it's his church. And we all left, and we got a letter a little bit later that said we could not come back.
Excommunicated
From the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. So And not all IFB
And
churches
all
are like
rejoiced.
that. Yeah. Not all IFB churches are like that. Like
Sure,
you can't paint it
sure.
with a broad brush. There was another one in my hometown that we started going to that was not like that. And the pastor was like really kind and gracious and not legalistic.
Mhm.
Like he wouldn't even go to the IFB conferences, you know? So I mean, they're not all like that, but
Sure.
that was kind of like what I experienced. So anyway, when I left Colorado and I moved here to Arizona to go to college, and I went to a Christian college. And
Now, was that considered independent fundamental?
No.
Or just pretty conservative?
No,
though?
just like a Southern Baptist kind of
okay.
college, still conservative,
Yeah.
Still like conservative politically, religiously, like all that stuff. Had like, even though we were adults going to a college, there were still like, dress code rules and like a curfew and stuff if you lived in the dorms, things like that. You weren't supposed to drink alcohol and you had to sign things. And I think all that's fine. But still conservative. But I went there and was there for 4 years, lived in the dorms. It was very like eye-opening in a lot of ways. Like I didn't hear about Orthodoxy there. I never heard about Orthodoxy there, even though I took, like part of the program is you end up leaving with like a minor in biblical studies. So like I did all these theology.
Yeah, we don't believe in the Bible though.
I took all these biblical studies classes and theology classes. I think I even took like a history, like a church history, Christian history class. Never heard Orthodox Christian, nothing like that, you know. I knew about the Catholics, but
in a negative way.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah. So but I'd say so one of the years, I think it was my junior or senior year there, I was taking a theology class, which was actually taught by my pastor at the time too. I was also going to his church, and he was a professor there. And we had to write I think it was our final paper in the class on the inerrancy of Scripture. So we had to defend the inerrancy of Scripture. And I might be getting the details wrong.
That's okay.
But basically,
story's still good.
Yeah, but basically, doing the research for that, I came across the councils, and I had never even heard of these before. I was like,
well, partly because within the fundamentalist and the Baptist world in general, they have this idea of no creed but the Bible, so they're not going to talk about any kind of a creedal statement or any kind of an ecumenical, council or anything like that.
Yeah. So exactly. So I came across these and I was like, what? And I mean, I think the only thing I had heard about them maybe was there were, because of the creed. Like I had heard of the creed.
Sure.
But I didn't know the history of it. I didn't know about the councils. And I remember kind of reading about those probably just like on Wikipedia or something like that and going, what? Wait a minute. What? Bishops are there? Yeah. Wait, bishops. Like, and I mean, all these questions that I had and like, oh, wait, okay. And I remember going through these thoughts like, oh yeah, the Trinity, that word is not actually in the Bible. Oh, but it was established here, like that word, not the doctrine, but the word,
right.
And like all of these things were kind of going click, 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 but not fully just like, oh, this is something I didn't know about. And I remember struggling to write that paper. And I kind of had to BS the paper in a way,
Sure.
I mean, I still believed in the inerrancy of Scripture. I still believed that was true and all that, but it was like, okay, here, so that was kind of my first like question.
Yeah.
And so then I started going like, I need to learn about like the Bible. Like, where does the Bible come from? Like all of these different versions of it, all that. So that was kind of like my first thing that I started looking into. And I was just kind of starting to question things in general. Like from kind of more of a young person being prideful, thinking you are super spiritual and have all the answers at the time. I did feel kind of like I was looking around going, why is no one else questioning things? Am I the only one? Of course not. I wasn't, and also just, you don't question things, really. I mean, it's just, most of us don't. We don't question, We're given what we are taught.
That's right.
And especially just in America, we're taught, well, I don't want to say what we're taught now. I mean, it's way different. But in general, I mean, the way I was taught was like, America is Protestant. It's a Christian nation. This is what it means to be a Christian. But we're the real Christians, and we have to save America, even though it's a Christian nation. I mean, confusing, things. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it started, I guess. And then I graduated from there.
What year did you graduate?
2013.
2013, okay.
Graduated in 2013 with my bachelor's degree. And then I went out into the world, I was living on my own, completely, like living in my own apartment without roommates, had my first real job in social work, like, just on my own completely, which was the first time I was living like on my own. And I was still going to just kind of like a Southern Baptist. It was under the Southern Baptist Convention, the church that I was going to. Pretty good church. I was on the worship team there. Like I sang on the team. I would go to I was really involved. I was even part of the evangelism team, and we would go to parks and try to talk to people about Christ using the Bible. And we would do I can't even remember what they were called. There were different programs, for it that we would do. Mm-hmm. And then the questioning just kind of kept happening, I guess. And I mean, there were a lot of things kind of happening at that time. Like, I was young, in my early 20s. I was in a not healthy relationship at the time. You remember? Mm-hmm. He was an interesting kind of character with his interesting ideas that were foreign to me at the time. That, combined with the questions I already had, combined with just kind of conversations that I would have with other Christians, like I would ask a question like, what does it mean to have faith? And then I would just get quoted scripture. Well, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. I'm like, but what does that mean? Mm-hmm. Because growing up, and even in just the evangelical world, faith is, or belief is basically just a mental assent to certain truths that you hold, like Christ is God, He died for my sins, He was resurrected. I believe those things, Okay, I'm saved, and that's what it means to have faith. Is just like a mental, a mental assent to those truths and accepting them. And I was coming to feel that wasn't enough. And I remember talking to my pastor at the time about this, and I feel like there's something more, but I don't know what it is, but it feels like there should be something more. And, in that relationship that I was in, it was unhealthy, and he was into some interesting things that were not Christian by any means. But there was a mystical aspect to it that in some ways I was like, these ideas are these ancient kind of ideas, that we can not just know God intellectually, but have an experience of Christ and know Him more intimately and be changed. And my thing was, I was doing all of the Christian things right. I was praying every day. I was reading my Bible every day. I was a better Christian than I am now. Well,
there's time for confession after this. So.
I was praying every day, reading my Bible.
But that was a part of what was expected of you, this rigidity,
right?
This, which is a good thing, and it can also be a bad thing.
Yeah. But it is again focused on these external things.
Yeah, exactly.
And I felt like I kept hitting a wall. I'm like, I'm doing everything right, but I'm still the same person. I'm still having similar struggles. I'm not perfect yet. And I'm where, and you're always told, nobody's perfect. You can never be perfect. And I mean, there is sort of truth to that now, being Orthodox, I understand that, but you can reach theosis.
Mhm.
And I think that's what I was looking for,
Mhm.
is something that I could continue to become perfect.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And perfected in
Perfected.
Christ,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
That you almost like an expectation, well, having done all these things, I thought I'd be further along than I am right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I still struggle.
Well, yeah, sure. That's good that you struggle
yeah.
with that, you know?
Yeah. So, so I remember my pastor at the time, even though, I mean, he was just a Protestant Bible believing guy. He gave me this book to read called Mansions of the Heart.
Mm.
And I think it's written by a Protestant person too. But it talked about Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, which are saints in the Roman Catholic Church.
Right.
And about these, I think, 7 mansions of the heart, which is like, spiritual growth essentially. Mm-hmm. And you go through these different levels or mansions until you reach, theosis essentially, or mm-hmm. whatever the Roman Catholic equivalent of that
Union
is.
With God of some
Union
kind.
with God. Yeah. And then after reading that, I was like, whoa, okay, like this is kind of what I'm looking for right here. Like mm-hmm. this feels true. This is something I feel like I'm missing in my life. So I actually got like what is it called? One of the ones by St. John of the Cross.
Cloud of Unknowing, or
I did read that one. But the
Dark Night of the Soul.
Dark Night of the Soul. Thank you. That's the one. Yeah. And I was reading those and kind of entering into that more, I guess, like mystical mm-hmm. part of being a Christian, but it was still confusing.
Very.
And even before that happened, I was interested in like Rob Bell. You know Rob Bell?
I know Rob Bell.
Yeah. And he's kind of gone even in a different direction now.
His last name rhymes with where he's going, but anyway.
But I was like interested in him, and he had these videos on YouTube at the time mm-hmm. that was like his Everything is Spiritual tour.
Yeah.
And I remember watching those and just being like, yes, exactly. Everything is spiritual. Exactly. And just being so like excited about that. And like, so then these Catholic mystics were kind of like the next step, so, and then,
side note on Rob Bell. I remember watching a video. It was, or having read something where he was on this walk through the woods, and it seems like he had his son with him or something like that. And I'm thinking, this guy's just a good storyteller. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I feel like he was so close to like being Orthodox.
Until he started hanging out with Oprah. But
he could have easily like entered into the Orthodox world. Like,
well, those guys were searching for truth. I mean, all joking aside, I think they were experiencing some of what you mm-hmm. were experiencing, which is saying there's got to be more.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
and I read all kinds of, not just his books, but like other people kind of in that, I don't even know what you
Blue like jazz and all that stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like progressive Christianity or, that kind of stuff. Yeah. I guess you would call it. I don't know, but
avant-garde.
So I mean, they're like, they were on some right path there.
It's like grunge music. It's kind of pushing the edge of what had been, kind of just plastic.
And I remember getting a lot of, crap for reading those at the time, because I think I was still going to my Christian school, my Christian college, when I was reading some of that stuff.
I think I was pastoring a Baptist church at that time.
I mean, it helped me feel like my questions were valid.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It gave me, I felt accepted there, mm-hmm. Because that was a big thing, is like when I was having all these questions and living on my own without even a roommate.
And having been the black sheep at home and at school.
Just lots of loneliness, lots of lonely like feelings, and like, am I the only one that is questioning this? Like, I remember saying to some of my friends at the time when I was going through this was actually like towards where I was actually starting to become Orthodox before going to an Orthodox church. But I was like pretty much Orthodox at the time.
You're thinking.
Yeah. I remember saying to multiple of my friends, like, we were born in America. We know Protestantism and Catholicism. That's like real to us. What if you were born in Iran, Iraq, India, any of these places with Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam or any other? That would be your truth, Is no one supposed to question their version of the truth? You know, like just ask. I'm not saying you have to, leave Christ or leave your church. Just ask. Like, is what I was given true?
Right.
Is it true? Like, is it really capital T true?
Right.
that was what I was looking for, was like the capital T truth. I mean, that's what I kept saying, thinking, wanting, yeah, and slowly but surely I became very disillusioned with the Protestant world, the evangelical world, not having my questions really answered for me, outside of this mystical book from the Roman Catholics, kind of like, that's interesting. Where's that tradition in the Protestant world? It's not. I mean, the Pentecostals say they have it, right?
Yeah, it's not the same, though.
It's not
not by any stretch.
Right.
Yeah.
So I started a journey then of, I guess, there's like a word that people use for this now. What is it? And I mean, it was like a really popular word. People stripping away their faith, in a sense.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Deconstructing
their faith. Yeah. So in a way, I was doing that. Unfortunately, a lot of people, when they do that, they lose their faith completely. They deconstruct until there's no construction there anymore at all. They completely take the whole structure away. And I did do that a little bit. I had decided at one point that I didn't know what the truth was. I didn't know who God was. I didn't know if Christianity was true or something else. And I spoke to my pastor. Even prior to this, I stopped being on the worship team at my church and things like that. And then I eventually spoke to my pastor and told him, I'm going to be leaving, And I remember him just telling me, just make sure you have a group of people, a church, quote unquote, to be part of, whether that's just a group of people, something. And I did. I had my friend group, and we got together every Sunday after church.
Right.
And so I still had that. And I left that, and I didn't go to church for a while. I don't know how long. I'd say maybe 6 months, maybe longer. I don't remember. And my goal was just to figure out what I believed, what was true. But I could never leave this belief that, the central belief that was always the sticking point for me, that I could never reject, was that Christ was God. And I mean, as you know, all the other faiths, no other faith believes Christ is God.
Right.
Only Christianity. And so I was still struggling with is that belief wrong? But
Yeah.
I couldn't reject that one. And I would even if some of my friends or people I knew were questioning if I had left the faith or whatever, left I'm no longer saved, essentially. I'd be no, I still love Christ. I know he's God, so I guess I'm still a Christian. I don't know what to believe about him,
Right.
And so I started checking out all kinds of things. I even went to the Sikh temple. I even went to LGBTQ churches. I went to everything. And I actually had a friend at the time who was questioning things and just kind of an interesting, open-minded sort of person. And she was going with me to some of these things. I also, this is kind of a funny thing, but I joined Tumblr, which is kind of I don't know what it's like now because I haven't been on it for so long, but it was kind of a blogging thing, sort of like Facebook mixed with Blogger or something. And there were people on there that would be posting about their faith, whoever, whatever faith they were. And I would just find people of all faiths and just follow them if they were writing theological things, there's a I don't know, a Unitarian, follow. There's a Anglican, follow, And I would just I accumulated all these people So I was reading their theological posts and seeing what their lives were like and stuff. And I ended up following an Orthodox person on there. And he was writing all kinds of theological things about the Orthodox faith. And like, I remember he was writing things contrasting some of the theology of the Orthodox Church with like the Protestant churches, like about like original sin, hell, heaven, like all these things that like when I was a Baptist, I mean, those things are like huge topics. Like what is hell and what is, I mean, I heard about hell so much as a independent fundamental Baptist. It was like, I heard more about hell than heaven, you know? So I remember one of those posts, I was like, whoa, this is interesting. Like, it almost kind of felt like I always believed that in some way. Like, I always thought that, but like, you know, you don't know that you always thought that until you read it or someone says it and you're like, yes, exactly that. That's what I have always felt, you know? It was like it gave words to some things. And so my interest was piqued. And so I started looking at Orthodoxy. But I remember like clicking on some more links of Orthodox people and going, they have priests. Ew, gross. And then I literally didn't look at it again for a while. I mean, that's how deeply embedded like the Romaphobia, you know, phobia of Roman looking things.
Yes.
That's how deeply embedded it was. I just like, you know, it didn't matter that the theology was interesting and piqued something in me that felt right. It was like, ew, priests.
I had a lady tell me that when she sees men dressed in black, that she has an immediate nausea reaction.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow, you know, that's, first off, that's really sad. Secondly, that sounds to me like there's something that needs to be healed there. But she was so, I don't know, maybe she was abused. I don't know exactly all the details, but it's like, you know, that's how deeply ingrained that, like you said, anti-Catholic sentiment can be.
I mean, that's like ingrained not just in the like IFB world or Baptist world or Protestant world, but like the culture.
Oh yeah.
Because of all of the, you know, and the stories are true. There are like true,
it's terrible things
horrible,
that have happened. Yeah,
like horrific stories. But like in the independent, the IFB world, it's hard to say that over and over again. In the IFB world, the Catholics were almost seen as like potentially the Antichrist.
Yeah, well, definitely the Pope was the Antichrist.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You know,
but there are many Antichrists.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Your
yeah,
neighbor.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it was very, I wouldn't say it was nausea, but it was definitely sort of a repulsion there to it. Like, ugh, gross. Like, no.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it's like those things chip away over time. I don't know, over time that chipped away. I started reading, like I went to the library to find any Orthodox, or not Orthodox books specifically, but any church history book I could find, like someone who wrote something about the history of the church from the beginning to now. And I found like a series of 2 books. I think the guy was Methodist. I don't think he ever said the word Orthodox, but his writing about the ancient church and what that was actually like, it was my first time really hearing about that. Like the catacombs, the persecutions,
probably the church fathers,
the saints, like how, you know, like the progression and like changes of like, even, you know, how like even some of the early Protestant reformers like Luther and Calvin, they still believed in the Theotokos, you know, the Virgin Mary, you know, different things like her ever virginity, I should say, and things like that. And I was like, okay. And, you know, the catacombs and all of that, those stories were really compelling, you know. And then I ended up visiting an Orthodox church, St. John, is it the Evangelist? The one that's in Mesa?
St. John, well, it wasn't Tempe?
No, the other one.
St. Ignatius.
St. Ignatius, thank you, yeah. So St. Ignatius, I ended up visiting that one because, come to find out, someone I knew was Orthodox without me knowing he was Orthodox, and he went to St. Ignatius, and I contacted him and I was like, I heard you're Orthodox. And he's like, who told you? you know, and so he invited me there. I went, was still not ready for it. It was weird and foreign, culture shock.
Sure.
I only stayed for the service and then went home. But I just kept reading and researching. And before I knew it, I was like, because I had started this whole thing, not knowing what was true, then coming to a point where I realized it is Christianity that's true, but where is the ancient faith? If this is what the ancient faith was, where it's got to still exist, because Christ said that the church would prevail against the
gates of hell.
The gates of hell. Thank you. So like it's got to exist somewhere. Where is it? And then it was basically between Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism at that point. And I ended up meeting another person on Tumblr who was Orthodox, and me and him started conversing over on Tumblr and on the phone and text, and he was helping me answer a lot of questions. He had also gone through almost converting to Catholicism and ended up becoming Orthodox. So he helped me work through some of that stuff. And before I knew it, I was like, okay, I'm pretty much Orthodox now. I'm just not at a church. And I was nervous to go to a church. And my friend convinced me to go. The one I was talking to. He convinced me to go. I found Exaltation of the Holy Cross. And my first day there was Palm Sunday. That was my first day. So right at the beginning of Holy Week. It was my first day. And I remember at the end of the service, Chuck was handing out the crosses, and he said, "Welcome home." And that word, whenever there's a new convert,
right,
I always tell them "Welcome home" when I come up,
right?
Because those words to me, after going through everything and feeling I don't belong here, I don't belong here.
Yep.
What's the truth? It was that was it, I mean, and the whole service, I just knew that this was it. This was.
Well, I'm so disappointed it wasn't my sermon. Just
I don't even remember the sermon.
I don't either. It's okay. So.
But I mean, the whole thing,
Yeah, the whole experience.
And the community too.
Yeah.
Everyone was helpful. I remember the first people I met were Laura Ross, Wayne, and Jaden, and they explained things to me, and even some of the Romanian things, because there were a lot of Romanians still attending, and it was really cool, and then you gave me your contact info, and basically the rest is history. And I, then I was baptized on October 4th. It'll be this year. On October 4th this year, it'll be 10 years.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
So,
awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. So you came not long after I got here. Then very close after I got here. Yeah. So let me ask you a couple questions. What time we got here? We got about 15 minutes. Great story there. You went to a church where there was an expectation of how you dress and everything, and here you sit dressed in a skirt and very modestly. What I'm wondering is okay, on the outside looking in, it may look like the same kind of a thing, but obviously something's different. So you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Wow. That's I actually think about this a lot, because it was a struggle for me then, the expectations, and it's still a struggle for me now. So I'm not out of the woods with the struggle, and it's something I'm always conflicted about. Should I only be wearing dresses? Because there are some Orthodox women who choose to only wear very modest, long dresses. Even some women, they wear head coverings all the time, all the time. And I do wear a head covering during church, and I recently started doing it while I pray at home too.
Oh, okay.
But that's new.
And it wasn't mandated.
No, it was never mandated.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
Right.
In Orthodoxy, even though we have really, we have monasticism, which is very mandated in a way.
High standards.
Once you become a monastic, you're mandated to live that very ascetic, conservative life, and even if you visit some of the monasteries, you're supposed to dress like a certain way and things like that.
You won't get in otherwise.
Yeah, right. But it's meant for them. And for us who are still living in the world, I never got the feeling that I had to do those things. And I'm sure there are people out there who say you should. I mean, I've heard people say you should.
Yeah.
But when I became Orthodox, I took it very seriously, and I still try to take it seriously. It's hard to take. It's hard, but I was very I remember knowing before I came that women often wear head coverings, and I was like, that's interesting, and I was researching it, and I remember everything that I saw made me feel like this is about, does God want you to do this? What is God telling you to do? And not just that, but for me, I've always struggled with, as every woman does, our self-esteem, confidence, beauty, and wanting to look a certain way when you're in front of other people.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Orthodox world, when you're at church, it's not about you. And that's a big difference. When I was at the Bible believing, just that, Southern Baptist Church, or even in the IFB church, there were so many times when it was about you, when I was on the worship team, I started becoming very conscientious about the fact that I was up there standing with my back to the altar, looking out at the crowd, and they're looking at me.
Yeah.
Now, the intent is that they're worshiping God and not me.
Yeah, sure.
But I couldn't help but start to feel like they're looking at me.
Yeah.
But I'm up here, and I have to look and present a certain thing. I have to sing well, but I'm singing about God. And in the Orthodox world, that's not the case. We're here at church, it's the work of the people, not me, the worship leader on the stage. The priest, and even the priest is in the altar, and you can't see him most of the time.
And he's got his back to you.
And he's got his back to you, and he's facing that way, east, most of the time.
Yeah.
Because it's about God and worshiping Him. And so when I decided to come to the Orthodox Church, I decided to wear a head covering because that's what I feel about it. It makes it less about me. Because, the Bible says that a hair is a woman's glory. Or
hair is a woman's glory.
Hair is a woman's glory. Mm-hmm. And look at my hair. I got long hair. I like my hair.
Yeah.
That's my favorite physical attribution of myself. I've done a lot of work to make it nice and healthy, but when I'm at church, the head covering goes on because it's not about how beautiful my hair is.
It's interesting.
Even though I like it.
Yeah, it's interesting in the conservative Jewish community right now. The women might have beautiful, long, luxurious hair.
They completely cover theirs. They don't even
wear
show.
A wig.
They don't even. They don't even show a lock of their real hair.
Exactly right. That's for at home. That's
Yeah, and
it's a modesty issue.
I think it's beautiful. I think that's beautiful.
Oh, I agree.
I think the Orthodox tradition of wearing a head covering is beautiful.
Yeah.
And some women choose not to. I mean, it's whatever. It's between them, their spiritual father,
right?
Their specific convictions and circumstances. And I've even gone through, should I wear it all the time? And there are even movements in the Protestant world of veiling all the time and not wearing, just wearing a head covering everywhere you go. I've thought about that.
It's good to think about those things from the perspective of constantly kind of asking the question, God, what do you want me to do?
Yeah,
there?
exactly.
You know what I mean? And so not to automatically assume that the conviction that you've come to at a certain point in your life may not be the full
Right.
conviction that God wants for
Always
you.
realizing you could be wrong.
Absolutely. Reserving the right to be wrong
Right,
is
yes,
what I
yep,
like to say,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is what I'm hearing you say is that even though you were in a group that was, let's just say, focused on the externals by way of dress and makeup and all those different things, that's not your motivation when you're talking about whether or not to wear a head covering, whether or not to wear something modest, and it's those kinds of things. What you're talking about is really an obedience to what God wants, what is appropriate, and not becoming a stumbling block for, let's face it, men are very visually driven. And we have a society right now where scantily clad seems to be, for most people, the idea that they're appropriately clad. And that's not necessarily the case, And so, being kind of conscious of your relationship with God, but also your relationship within the community and stuff,
Yeah, and I mean, I still wear pants, you know.
Yeah.
I sometimes wear shorts, but I try to, like you said, ask, like, I always ask, where am I going? Who's gonna be there? What kind of impression of being a Christian am I giving by doing this thing? Dressing this way, and is it what God wants me to do?
Yeah.
And there are some. I mean, they wanted us to go sledding in dresses when I was in IFB. Sledding.
We went to a homeschoolers convention with our kids back in the late 80s, I guess it was. And one of the main speakers was talking about how he didn't let his kids sing any songs other than the ones he had written. And then they break out these swimming suits for the women that I'm like, I get modesty, but
how do you swim?
You might drown in that thing,
Now,
I will say that my perspective on all that's changed over the years and stuff, as far as, because I've become much more conscious of modesty and things than I was back then. But it's really interesting, because the fact is that if we're growing, our perspective is going to change over time. So let me ask you a final question here. If you had to identify one thing that has been different for you in your Orthodox experience. By the way, Collette ended up meeting her husband here, has 2 children. My wife would like me to make sure that I point out that she said from the very beginning that Collette and Adam should be together, and started working that way. And so your whole life's changed within the church, you and Adam and the boys and stuff. But if you can, is there one thing that you would say is like a central difference, inspiration, or anything like that with being in the Orthodox Church?
There's not one.
Okay.
There's multiple.
Okay.
Let's see.
Give me 1 or 2.
Yeah. There's room for the sinner. I mean, like I said.
Oh, that's a great answer. Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, I've always struggled with that from the background I come from, there not being room for the sinner, feeling like a black sheep no matter what, that I couldn't be good enough. I still struggle with that. It's like my thing. My sticking point is like wanting to be perfect and realizing every day that I am not.
And that it's okay.
Yeah. And my kids point it out to me all the time, of course, that I'm not. My husband does, which is the point. But
it also means they're not perfect. But anyway.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it is. That's true.
Take that home.
But when we say the Jesus prayer, Lord have mercy on me, a sinner, the sinner sometimes, and it's a hospital for the sick. I'm sick too. Despite my presentation of perfection sometimes that I can put out there, I'm not. And God's okay with that. He wants us to be perfect. It says I'm perfect. You be perfect,
Therefore,
right?
you be perfect. Yeah.
But most of us aren't,
Mhm.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
And in the church, we recognize that we are not okay with it, but we accept it, I guess. You know, like everyone is on a journey, and we're all trying to be more like Christ, and we all have our different struggles and stumbling blocks along the way, and everyone has different sins, but we all have sins, and we all recognize that, and no one's better than anybody else, unless you're a saint. Then you are. But even the saint wouldn't say that.
Well, I was going to say that. Yeah, the saint wouldn't say that. The saint would say, "Oh, pray for me. I'm a sinner."
Right. Yeah.
You know, the story about the old monk that was dying, and his disciples were gathered around.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of came to consciousness, and they waited to hear what his last words were, and he said, "I've not yet begun to repent." And so it's being conscious of our absolute, utter dependence upon Christ, and at the same time also just recognizing that everybody else is in the same boat that we're in. You know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I guess.
So what would you tell somebody that's investigating Orthodoxy, either coming from whether it's independent fundamental or just a non-Orthodox perspective? Give them a 2-minute bit of advice. What you would say to them?
I would say be open-minded. Don't assume that what you know is true is the truth all the time. Orthodoxy is still new to America, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And most people still don't know about it, although it's picking up. So just be open-minded. Ask yourself, what was Christianity really like, when it started? And is it the way that your church does it, the way that the Bible is interpreted, in your church, or the way you've learned it, Stay off the internet, like internet orthodoxy. There's some good people on there. Like, there are some good people who are bringing a lot of people to Christ, but there's also a lot of political stuff mixed in with it that does not belong in orthodoxy.
Yeah, unless you're willing to follow an online medical advice to do your own appendectomy, you should probably go to an expert, go to an actual authority, go to a priest, go to a bishop, go to a site that's actually got some credibility instead of just sites that want to argue all the time. Sorry, I couldn't help it.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
And I guess also don't assume you know everything. Remember that you're a sinner. But don't live in that identity as a sinner either.
Yeah.
We can be perfected.
Absolutely.
We can reach theosis, and God willing, hopefully that'll be us one day.
Yeah. Because the bottom line is even though we are all broken and sinners, Christ, we're the very ones that Christ came to rescue.
Yep.
So, okay, good. All right, well, thanks a lot. And for having zero knowledge of what I was going to ask you, you did pretty darn good. So thanks, Collette. Let me just kill this here real quick.